Thanks, James. Hi, this is Maria, and today I'll be introducing CRL's Model Licensing Terms and Specifications for Global Data Resources. We just recently completed and posted the first draft of these model terms, and we're now entering into the review period, during which we'll be seeking your input on how to improve this document. Today I'm going to talk about the background and the content of the terms and ask that you keep in mind that we want to hear from you about how you think we can make this a better resource to best meet your library's data licensing needs. The link at the bottom of this slide, the bottom left of this slide, will take you to the web page where you'll find the draft of the terms and specifications. They're available to you as both a PDF or as a Word document that you can download. We invite you to review the draft and share your thoughts and feedback with us if you haven't had a chance to do so yet. I'll begin today by going over the process that led CRL to getting involved in data licensing and developing these terms and specifications. As many of you are probably aware, CRL has a licensing program where we negotiate favorable terms for purchase and subscription to electronic resources by our member libraries. CRL's licensing program aims to support the licensing needs of our members. We facilitate the support in part through our eDesiderata platform, which is an online interactive space for sharing information on e-resources of interest to CRL libraries. Our members use eDesiderata to track the status of e-resources available through CRL for member licensing, as well as to make suggestions to us about resources that are of interest to them. A couple of years ago, in efforts to inform CRL on how we can most effectively support licensing activities at our member libraries, CRL began hosting the eDesiderata Forum. This is an online event held annually to engage our members in conversations about challenges and opportunities in library licensing activities. The discussions are aimed at shaping CRL's licensing agenda for the coming year. The first annual eDesiderata Forum was held in November of 2016 on the topic of licensing big data resources. The program provided an overview of the existing landscape of available global databases, datasets, and other major electronic resources in the subject areas of financial, census and population, public opinion, and geospatial data. CRL invited librarians with data licensing experience to act as our panelists, and they provided an overview of data licensing in their particular area of expertise. We had 11 presenters that spoke in the subject areas that I mentioned before: financial, population, public opinion, and GIS data. The panelists identified and discussed with participants the challenges that libraries face in dealing with providers of data resources, who are often unfamiliar with the special requirements of their academic customers. These challenges include inconsistency in vendor delivery standards and practices, limitations on allowable authorized users and allowable uses, and restrictions on local storage and archiving of licensed materials. Of the many findings that came out of the forum's discussions was a discovery that there's a general need for support of individual library dealings with commercial data vendors. The group agreed that it would be beneficial to have a community-wide pooling of expertise to produce guidelines for library negotiations with producers and vendors of data. It was suggested that cooperative work in this area might create boilerplate for licensing terms to supplement those already available through LibLicense and other models. In response to these findings, we've been working on the draft of the model licensing terms and specifications for global data resources. If you want to learn more about the forum from 2016, the link at the bottom of this slide will take you to the event page. If you're curious about the types of resources that these terms are designed for, you can find some examples on our eDesiderata platform. So you know, in order to view certain parts of the platform and make comments or suggestions, you do need to log into eDesiderata. You can log in using the username and password that you used to register for this webinar. Once you're in, you can browse the data resources that these terms and specifications refer to by using several watch lists that we've developed. There are links on the right side of this slide that will take you to those watch lists. Those links will take you into eDesiderata to view the list of resources that CRL has tagged as big data in the 4 subject areas listed. You can further refine the list by filtering by resource type or subject area. And we invite you to explore these resources and suggest other data resources that are of interest to your institution, and also provide feedback on our existing entries. An example that you might be familiar with of the types of resources that our terms and specifications target is Landscan, which is a subscription-based data set of population distribution data that's provided by Eastview. This is the type of resource that we're referring to. However, generally speaking, Eastview is a provider that's more familiar with the academic market than most vendors of data resources. In terms of licensing tools for the library community, there is an existing body of model licenses for libraries to rely on in dealing with e-resource vendors. We acknowledge and refer to those models when constructing our terms to ensure that there's no overlap or redundancies, but rather that our model terms are building on the language and responding to the specific and niche needs of data licensing. We relied most heavily on the LibLicense model agreement, and we referred to the LibLicense sections in our model terms and specifications. LibLicense and other existing models deal mostly with journal or ebook databases and not necessarily data resources, hence the need for a more specialized set of licensing guidelines. We also cross-referenced and compared our terms to licenses for data resources from commercial vendors to understand the standard licensing conditions of providers that they expect and mandate. We had really wonderful contributors that we relied on heavily to help us draft these model terms and specifications. They shared with us their own boilerplate language that they used in data licensing previously, and also advised us on a special set of circumstances that libraries deal with when they're involving themselves in licensing data products. One very important contributor to this process was the Ontario Council of University Libraries, or OCUL. OCUL is a Canadian consortium, and they've negotiated terms for licensing geospatial data sets that are included in Scholar's GeoPortal. GeoPortal is a service of OCUL that provides members with access to geospatial data sets licensed by their university library. OCUL licenses numeric and geospatial data files for the use by researchers and students of its members. Because of this unique experience, OCUL was able to advise us on how to build a licensing tool that would be highly effective in helping libraries negotiate agreements with vendors for academic use of data. In introducing this language, we want to once again emphasize that these model terms and specifications are our first draft, and as I mentioned before, in order to make this the most useful tool we can, we want your input and feedback. We're interested in hearing how we can improve this to meet your institution's needs. Again, the link to the document is at the bottom of this slide. As it exists now, the draft covers 4 major areas of data licensing. Each area responds to a particular condition that libraries will likely have to address when working with commercial vendors. The first section covers authorized uses. Because the nature of academic use of global datasets can be very different from use of journal or ebook resources, particularly in terms of how data will be manipulated by scholars, libraries may need to specifically address permissions for uses in the license, including terms regarding creation and ownership of derivatives, rights for data mining, and use in education, teaching, and research of the data. The second major section addresses licensure performance obligations. Vendors may use a variety of different delivery methods that are unfamiliar or even unacceptable for storage and management in library repositories. Therefore, they may need to be explicitly instructed on acceptable delivery formats, not only for the data, but also metadata and accompanying documentation that the library requires in order to facilitate access. This should be included in the language describing how the licensor will make materials available to the licensee. Additionally, vendors may need explicit instructions on what libraries require when receiving data updates. The third section focuses on language for perpetual licensing and archiving. CRL recommends that agreements provide for how the licensed materials are to be handled upon termination or expiration of the agreement. Vendors may be unfamiliar with academic practices for archiving materials, so licenses should specify where they can that data be retained as opposed to being destroyed upon expiration of agreements. Libraries should negotiate for perpetual access and/or the right to make archival copies of the material to support long-term research, peer review, and scholarly sharing. The final major component of our document addresses specifications for description, delivery, and format. These are referenced in the licensor obligations section earlier in the document, but this component should further specify the data content and how, when, and in what format the data will be delivered. CRL recommends the inclusion of a schedule or multiple schedules to the agreement that specify description of the license materials, fees and delivery terms, and specification of format types to be delivered. To illustrate the importance of these special terms for data licensing, I've isolated a few examples from our model language. For instance, in Section 2, Part G, concerning derivatives, the language describes how authorized users may selectively extract data from the licensed material to alter, transform, modify, or arrange data in the most appropriate form for their academic work. The slide on the screen shows a couple of examples of derivatives created using global data sets. The image on the left is a series of charts of lightning hotspots that was derived from lightning imaging sensor data from NASA. This was from a paper by faculty members at the University of Sao Paulo, published in 2016. And the image on the right is a surface gradient map that used data from Esri, from a paper published by a faculty member at Green Mountain College. These are just two examples of the unique ways data can be used in scholarly research, thus providing a need to establish the right for authorized users to create derivatives. We learned from our contributors that it's also important to establish ownership over the derivatives in the license. CRL recommends language that specifies that authorized users will retain ownership over all derivative works. Additionally, we included language regarding how derivative works will be created so that they cannot be converted back to the original source data, which may be very important to the data provider. Another special consideration is dealing with data updates. In terms of licensors providing updated data to the library, CRL recommends that it be required that the licensor specify the changes made to the data upon delivery of the update. If a vendor expects that previous versions of the data will be deleted as updates are provided, libraries can imagine how this could negatively affect scholarly citations to earlier versions of the data. Therefore, libraries should negotiate terms that give libraries the right to archive and continue to provide access to past versions of the data, provided that the library identifies those versions as not current. The image on the screen shows an example of how libraries might enact version control over data updates. There are also many format types that vendors may use in delivering data to libraries or to their customers. So libraries need to be very specific about which are acceptable because vendors may be inconsistent or may use a format type that causes problems for the library when trying to provide access to the data product. For example, they may use a proprietary format that the library finds to be unusable upon receiving. You can see from the image on the screen, this is a set of GIS data formats that exist, and you can see the wide range of formats out there. So it's important to be very specific when negotiating format conditions. Our model terms and specifications do provide examples of acceptable format types for both financial and GIS data sets. We received these from libraries who have included them in their data licenses in the past. So that's a brief glimpse at what the terms and specification document looks like currently. In looking forward to how we want to improve and share these terms and specifications, as I mentioned, we are first soliciting your feedback. There are a few ways that you can share feedback with us. The first of which is that you can directly comment on the PDF that we've posted. It's a Google Doc, so if you highlight the text, you can add your own comments onto the document. I also invite you to email comments and questions to me or to download a copy of the Word document and mark that up and email it back directly to me. We are accepting comments on the document through June 15th. That's our review period, at which point we'll begin revising based on the feedback that we've received. The final version will be published on CRL's website and will be openly accessible to everyone. And we plan to have the final version available before the next annual eDesiderata Forum, which is set for Wednesday, October 17th. And that wraps up my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. Okay, we have a question about CRL's Someone's wondering if CRL has any plans to develop additional tools for data licensing at libraries. And in fact, we are. Another common discussion point from the 2016 eDesiderata forum was that commercial data vendors have a lot of language that can prove to be problematic or troublesome for libraries in providing access and protecting their users, their patrons. So some of these conditions didn't fit neatly into the document that we've just drafted. So we're developing a list of guidelines that will advise librarians on terms and conditions from vendors that they should be on the lookout for, sort of a beware of list. And where those terms and conditions are encountered, we'll provide some guidelines for how to deal with them. For example, you might have a vendor asking that they be able to conduct security audits on users' computers, and obviously a library can't comply with that. So that will be coming soon as an accompanying document. I see another question about how someone is wondering how they might easily identify the ways that these terms differ or expand on the lib license language. And we've tried to make that easy for the readers of the document by including references to the lib license sections that our terms are building off of in a footnotes in our document, so that you can exactly see what is different in our terms and specifications and how it modifies or expands upon lib license language.
This is James. Let me just add to that we saw that in many cases, the standard terms that were included in model licenses like license and some of the others that have been well vetted and have been long used, some of those terms were very specifically geared towards ongoing subscription databases or textual resources, and sometimes the recommendations that we received from our advisors were in direct conflict with the language in the lib license or in the other ones, and so we were a bit at odds at times over how to reconcile the recommendations from the data librarians with those of the licensing language. So to an extent, we wanted to make sure that the language that we were providing was kind of a net add-on to any agreement that you might receive. So the ability to improve the authorized uses or to augment any particular subject or any particular clauses about perpetual licenses. We didn't want to rewrite or even just copy lib license into our recommendations. I think that's why we referred to the significant portions of lib license. But I think those clauses can also be, depending on the model license that you choose to use, you can refer to any specific portion of yours and decide what to include or not to include in any other standard license.
So we've received a question about the progress on the revised CRL lib license model license for eResources. People have heard that CRL is working on a revision, and we can't speak to that right now. We don't have any knowledge about a revision.
Right. I don't believe that we're not actually planning a revision to lib license. We work very closely with lib license. As you know, CRL has been the host of the lib license website and listserv, and it is a tool that we recommend for libraries to use. However, lib license itself and the model license from lib license is distinct from CRL's licensing practice. We won't be making those changes without consultation from lib license itself or from the community that's seeing it. However, it's an interesting idea about whether lib license can use ongoing adaptation. And we'll be happy to take that back to Ann Okerson and to those who were engaged in the first revision of lib license.
Great. Well, thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you on how we can best meet your data licensing needs. And thanks very much.